Technology can be a blessing, but sometimes people simply don't understand how important a gadget is. That is mainly because of the fact that some gadgets were way ahead of their time and they clearly did not solve an existing problem. What if we told you that we actually had a proper electric vehicle from a legacy auto manufacturer way back in the 90s and nobody took it seriously? Well, if that caught your attention, stick till the end of the video to know a lot more about the first digital camera ever to be sold. Not by Canon, Nikon, or even Olympus, but by a brand that is famous for computer hardwares. Let's dive in. 8th. Nokia E90 Communicator. By 2008, Apple was able to convince the masses that the iPhone would be the future of smartphones. But Nokia tried to do things differently with the E90 Communicator. This was a phone and a laptop all-in-one device that can fit into your pocket. Well, today it might sound quite normal to have a powerful computer in your pocket, but back in 2008, this was revolutionary. The phone was equipped with a 3.2 megapixel camera with flash and autofocus along with 3G compatibility, Wi-Fi, infrared and Bluetooth connectivity along with a voice recorder and GPS navigation. This phone might be huge by today's standards, but for the target audience back in the day, the size of this phone was never a problem because you get a foldable form factor that so many smartphone manufacturers are now testing out in 2022, making the Nokia E90 way ahead of its time. 7th. Google Nexus Q. For a company as successful as Google, you might think that they are totally immune to failure. Well, that is not the case because Google Nexus Q was one among Google's top failed consumer hardware projects. It was announced during Google's annual I/O Developers Conference in June 2012, and it sold out overnight. If you are still clueless, well, the Google Nexus Q was an Android-based streaming device that could connect your phone and tablet to your home theater so that you could easily control it remotely and send content via cloud. What made this device special from the traditional home theater equipment was the fact that it had a very different design, and by different we mean a spherical design which made it look a lot like a bowling ball. However, this device was a total failure because of its price tag which, back in the day, costed as much as a game console. The Nexus Q couldn't play content from platforms outside of what Google and Android had to offer. Just 3 months after the launch, the company had to remove Nexus Q from its websites and the product was never for sale again. But for what it is, this was a gadget way ahead of its time, because today we are somewhat used to having smart connected devices, all thanks to Google Home and Amazon's Alexa. 6th. Sony Glastron. Today, with digital assets like NFTs being the talk of the town, we are quite familiar with virtual reality and augmented reality technology. But Sony, as a company, thought of virtual reality technology way ahead of the competition. This is because Sony wanted to add another element into their games and make you feel like you're actually in the game instead of playing outside the game. That's exactly what Sony Glastron was all about. This was a head-mounted system that was released way back in 1996. Yes, you heard it right, in 1996, making this one an early version of the VR tech that we know today. This product involved 2 LCD screens and 2 earphones for video and audio respectively. This was not a single product but a family of portable head-mounted displays that was way ahead of its time even before people knew about the internet. Sony was clearly ahead of its time with this VR headset. 5th. Apple Newton. What if we told you that the iPhone had a spiritual predecessor? Yes, that's right. Way back in 1992, Apple announced a device called the Newton, which was a PDA or personal digital assistant by the then Apple CEO John Sculley. The device could take notes, manage calendars, and store contacts, something that we often take for granted today. But back in 1992, this was a great deal. It could also send fax and even translate handwritten text into actual text. Apple's intention with the Newton was to create an entirely new class of computers, something that could easily slip into your pocket, at least in theory. Users could also load additional programs into Newton by linking it up to a Mac. But this feature was quite limited during its launch. What killed Newton was the competition. But nonetheless, the Apple Newton was way ahead of its time and it paved the way for something as revolutionary as the original iPhone. 4th. Palm Pilot. The Palm Pilot was released way back in 1996. The company behind this PDA originally focused on developing personal information management and handwriting recognition applications. These devices could play some games and it had a few basic applications. The PDA featured 120 kilobytes of RAM, a 16 MHz processor, and a monochrome touchscreen. Yes, you heard it right. A touchscreen way back in 1996. The Palm Pilot was not an instant hit, but it gained popularity each year, and by 1998 the company sold about 30 million devices. 3rd. Logitech Photon in 1990. If you think that the first truly digital camera was made by Canon, Nikon, or Olympus, well, you're wrong because the first digital camera was actually made by a company that is best known for making some of the finest keyboards and mice. Yes, we're talking about Logitech. Logitech then marketed their camera as Photon in 1992, and it was one among the first commercially available digital cameras on the market. This camera was aimed at businesses, realtors, insurance companies who required fast turnaround images. The images were in 8-bit grayscale and had a low resolution of about 376 into 240 pixels. You could only store about 32 photos. Out of so many things we take for granted, a camera in your phone is one of them, because back in the day it was really difficult to get a digital image, making the Logitech Photon way ahead of its time. Second, General Motors EV1. When we talk about electric cars, the first thing that would come to your mind would be some of those fancy Teslas. But Tesla is not a company that invented electric cars. Instead, they were just really good at marketing their products by creating some of the finest electric vehicles on the planet, which is why they enjoy the monopoly today. But if you could name one car that could have kickstarted the EV revolution, that would be General Motors EV1. The EV1 was a response to a mandate by Californian regulators to increase the production and sales of zero-emission vehicles. The car was built from aluminum and composites to keep the weight down to just 1,360 kgs even with 26 heavy lead-acid batteries. This EV could do 0 to 60 in about 8 seconds, which might not sound super fast today. But for a car that was built in the 90s that was quite fast, especially for an electric car of that era. It was also the first mass-produced and purpose-designed electric vehicle of the modern era from a major auto manufacturer and way ahead of its time. The EV1 had a range of about 120 to 140 miles on a single charge, all thanks to a huge advancement in nickel metal hydride batteries by a company that GM owned at that time, called Ovonic Battery Company. First, Google Glass. The Time magazine named the Google Glass to be one of the best inventions of 2012 because Google showed us what the future of technology could look like when it comes to virtual and augmented reality. The Google Glass was simply a really cool piece of tech that you could wear, but you would get a lot of attention for wearing it because back in the day, or even today, people are not used to wearing augmented reality glasses anything close to a Google Glass. Initially, Google Glass was only limited to a small community of developers. Google might have thought to make the product extremely exclusive so that it would get all the hype. But the problem was that exclusivity for a completely new and unseen product is not always the best way to create hype, and that is exactly what happened with Google Glass. The other reason why Google Glass was a failure was because of its huge price tag. You were required to pay $1,500 and nobody could actually justify that price tag, especially for something that does not do so much and it looks awkward on your face. Did we forget to mention that it had terrible battery life of about 3 to 4 hours? This is all thanks to the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi communications that happen between your phone and the glass. Everything the glass does requires a smartphone, and the battery was not good enough to handle that kind of processing power. There were several privacy concerns with Google Glass, which is why the glass was banned in public venues like bars, casinos, and restaurants. This is because the Google Glass owners had the ability to seamlessly record anything in their view, and more importantly, it just made you look ridiculous. Technology can be extremely fascinating, but only if it is released during a time when people could actually appreciate it or if it could actually solve a problem. If a piece of technology is trying to solve a problem that might exist in the future, then a gadget will only be appreciated by the future generations. That is not the right way to develop technology if you ask us, especially if companies want to make a profit with their invention. Either way, some of these projects really show us how far we were able to predict what the future is going to look like. Maybe someday in the future we will be wearing augmented reality glasses similar to Google Glasses.